On a stormy Tuesday evening, the wind howled fiercely, rattling the windows of the small cottage nestled on the outskirts of town. The rain poured in sheets, lashing against the walls with a ferocity that made the house groan. Inside, 5-year-old Eli sat cross-legged on the carpet in the living room, absorbed in building a tower out of wooden blocks. The sound of thunder cracked overhead, the deep rumbles echoing through the house as the storm worsened. His small fingers worked methodically, his concentration absolute as he tried to balance the red block at the top of his tower. His mother, Sarah, hummed softly in the kitchen, the scent of fresh soup filling the air. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes, Eli," she called out, her voice carrying across the room. Eli didn't respond. He had become suddenly still, his attention now fixed on something outside the window. His head tilted slightly as he listened intently. Sarah noticed the change in him. He hadn't moved in a while, his usual energetic chatter now replaced with an eerie silence. "Eli," she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she walked over to him. He didn't answer but gestured toward the window with a small, trembling finger. A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine as Eli's wide, concerned eyes stared out into the darkness of the storm. His small hand pressed against the fogged-up glass, leaving a smudge as his gaze remained fixed. "What is it, sweetie?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with worry. Eli's breath formed a mist against the window as he whispered, "Someone's crying." Sarah frowned, unsure of what he meant. At first, she dismissed it as just the storm's eerie sounds, thunder, wind, the creaking of old trees outside. "It's just the storm, honey," she said, trying to reassure him. "The wind makes all sorts of strange noises." But Eli wasn't convinced. He shook his head, his little face serious beyond his years. "No, Mommy, it's not the wind," he insisted. "Someone's hurt." Before Sarah could protest, the cry came again, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind. It was a high-pitched wail, full of pain and distress. Eli's eyes widened with empathy as he tugged at her sleeve. "Please, Mommy, we have to help." His voice wavered with a pleading tone that tugged at her heart. Sarah hesitated, weighing the risk of going outside in the storm against the desperation in Eli's voice. The storm was at its worst now. Dangerous winds, flooded streets, and the night itself had descended into an abyss of unrelenting rain. But Eli's concern was real, his innocence and determination stirring something in her. With a sigh, Sarah grabbed her raincoat from the hook by the door, realizing there was no way she could ignore her son's plea. "Stay inside, Eli," she said, trying to sound firm. "I'll just go see what it is." Eli nodded, his face full of worry. "I'll wait for you, Mommy." Sarah opened the door, the wind nearly knocking her back as it hit her like a wall. The rain came at her sideways, soaking her through within seconds. She squinted into the blackness, seeing nothing but the faint glow of their porch light. She called out, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" For a moment there was only the sound of wind and rain crashing around her. Then, faintly, she heard it again. The whine. It was softer this time, but unmistakably the cry of an animal in pain. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She took a shaky breath and pulled out her phone, flicking on the flashlight as she moved toward the driveway. The beam of light cut through the darkness, briefly illuminating the front yard. Then her breath caught in her throat. There, in the middle of the driveway, lying in a puddle of water and rain, was a German shepherd. Its coat, once a rich brown and black, was now soaked and matted with mud and blood. The dog's chest rose and fell with labored breaths, and its right front leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. The sight of it made Sarah's stomach turn. But it was the dog's eyes, amber, full of pain, that made her knees nearly give way. The poor creature had suffered, and it was still fighting to survive. "Mommy, did you find it?" Eli's small voice called from the doorway. Sarah turned quickly, trying to block his view, but it was too late. Eli ducked under her arm and gasped. His face didn't show fear, though. It was full of compassion, a tenderness beyond his years. "The dog is hurt," he said softly, taking a step forward. "We need to help him." Sarah's heart swelled with love for her son as he walked slowly toward the dog, his tiny feet careful on the wet pavement. The German Shepherd watched him, its gaze wary but not threatening. "It's okay," Eli whispered, kneeling beside the dog. "We're going to help you." To Sarah's astonishment, the dog didn't snap or growl. Instead, its tail gave a weak wag, barely a movement, but enough to reassure her. She stood frozen for a moment, her protective instincts clashing with the reality of the situation. The dog was injured, and it was unpredictable. Sarah knew better than to approach an animal in pain without caution. But Eli's unwavering kindness won over her hesitation. She bent down and gently touched the dog's head, feeling a faint lick against her fingers. "Okay," she whispered to the dog. "We're going to help you." Taking a deep breath, she turned back to Eli. "Stay close, sweetheart," she said softly, before rushing back inside for a towel, determined to help the dog despite the storm's fury. Despite his mother's warning, Noah stepped forward with determination, his small feet pressing against the soaked pavement as he moved toward the injured dog. His eyes, filled with empathy, never left the German Shepherd, who lay trembling in the rain. The dog's amber eyes flickered weakly, its body shuddering with each painful breath. Sarah, standing at the doorway, watched in awe as her son, so young yet full of understanding, knelt beside the animal without hesitation. "It's okay, boy," Noah whispered softly, his voice barely above the storm's roar. His tiny hands reached out slowly, offering a comforting touch. The dog, its pain evident in every ragged breath, didn't growl or recoil. Instead, it looked up at Noah with a mixture of trust and exhaustion, its tail barely wagging as though acknowledging the boy's kindness. Sarah's heart clenched as she watched the exchange. Her protective instincts flared, and she moved to call Noah back, but she stopped herself. There was something in the way the dog responded to him, something raw and pure that spoke to her on a deeper level. Noah wasn't afraid. Instead, he was showing the kind of compassion she often wished the world had more of. She could see it clearly now. He wasn't just comforting an injured animal. He was offering it hope. "Mom, we need to help him," Noah said, his voice filled with quiet resolve, not once looking back at her for confirmation. His words pierced Sarah's heart, and she realized that this wasn't just a child's plea. It was a call to action. She took a deep breath, her initial fear for Noah's safety slowly ebbing away. He was right. They couldn't leave the dog to suffer alone in the cold, especially when it was clear that the storm was only getting worse. Reluctantly, Sarah stepped forward. "Okay, sweetheart," she whispered, moving beside him. "But we need to be careful." She knelt next to Noah, her hands shaking as she gently stroked the dog's damp fur, feeling the heat from its body despite the chill of the rain. The dog looked up at them, its eyes heavy with pain but filled with gratitude. It let out a soft whimper, and Sarah could feel the weight of its suffering deep in her chest. "Let's bring him inside," Sarah said, her voice steady now, though her heart was racing. Together they maneuvered the dog onto a large beach towel Sarah had grabbed from inside. The dog yelped in pain as it was moved, but Noah's gentle voice continued to reassure him. "It's okay, Max," he whispered, as though he already knew the dog's name. "You're safe now." It took everything Sarah had to help Noah drag the heavy dog across the wet ground and toward the door. The rain pelted down harder, but they didn't stop. Despite the storm's intensity, nothing mattered more than getting the dog to safety. Once inside, they carefully laid Max, as Noah had already named him, on the living room rug, still drenched but now out of the rain. The boy's gentle hands continued to pet the dog, offering comfort as Sarah hurried to find towels to dry him off. "Mommy, he's really hurt," Noah said, his voice small but full of concern. "We have to help him." Sarah looked at her son, her heart swelling with pride. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. Noah's compassion was the guiding light in this moment, and she would do whatever it took to care for Max. "We will, sweetheart," she promised softly. "We'll take care of him together." As the days passed, a quiet bond formed between Noah and the dog, whom he had named Max. At first, Sarah thought it was just the natural response of a child to an injured animal in need of comfort. But soon, she realized that Noah's connection with Max went far deeper than mere compassion. Each day, as Sarah tended to Max's wounds and made calls to find a vet who could help, Noah seemed to know exactly what the dog needed, even without being told. He would whisper to Max, stroking his fur in a way that was almost hypnotic, and the dog would respond in kind, his eyes softening, his tail thumping gently against the floor, as if understanding Noah's quiet reassurance. Noah often sat beside Max, his small hands carefully wrapping the dog in a blanket or offering him a bowl of water. But it wasn't just the physical care that made the bond so strong. Noah seemed to sense things about Max, things no one else could have known. One afternoon, Sarah watched in awe as Noah, without a word, walked over to the dog and gently pressed his hand to Max's side, where the worst of his injuries were. "He's hurting inside," Noah said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just his leg. He's scared." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't told Noah about Max's trauma, hadn't even explained the extent of his injuries. Yet there he was, speaking with a certainty that sent a chill down her spine. "How do you know that, Noah?" she asked gently, kneeling beside him. Noah looked up at her, his blue eyes wide with a wisdom beyond his years. "He told me, Mommy," he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Max is sad and scared. He's been alone, and he needs us to help him feel safe again." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected her young son to have such an understanding of the dog's emotional state. She had expected him to be kind, of course, but this was something different. It wasn't just the care of a child for an animal. It was as though Noah could sense the very soul of the dog, could feel his pain and loneliness in a way no one else could. And it wasn't just his intuition that startled Sarah. It was the way Max seemed to respond to Noah. Whenever Noah spoke to him, the dog would watch him with such intensity that it was impossible to believe it was mere coincidence. Max would move closer, resting his head on Noah's lap, his amber eyes fixed on the boy with an expression that seemed almost knowing, as though he understood every word Noah spoke. That night, as Sarah watched Noah and Max curled up together on the living room floor, she felt a wave of awe wash over her. She knew that this wasn't just a simple case of a child comforting an injured animal. This was something much deeper, something she couldn't explain. The connection between Noah and Max felt fated, as though the dog had come into their lives for a reason, beyond simply seeking shelter from the storm. As Noah slept, his tiny hand resting on Max's fur, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was more than just a chance encounter. Was it possible that Max had found Noah because he too needed a safe place, a connection that could heal the wounds, not just in his body, but in his heart? The answer, Sarah realized, didn't matter as much as the truth she could feel in her bones. Noah and Max had found each other for a reason, and together they would heal. By the end of the week, it became impossible for Claire to ignore the strange connection unfolding between her son and the injured German shepherd. From the moment the dog, whom Noah had named Shadow, entered their lives, something invisible and profound had formed between them, something that defied logic. At first, Claire brushed it off as childhood imagination. Noah had always been an empathetic boy, sensitive and observant beyond his years. But as the days passed, the things he said about Shadow became too specific, too eerily accurate to dismiss. One quiet morning, as Claire was folding laundry on the couch, she overheard Noah murmuring softly to Shadow, who lay stretched beside him, still healing, but far more alert than when they'd first found him. "You didn't mean to run, did you?" Noah whispered, his fingers buried in the thick fur around Shadow's neck. "But you were scared. The man in the green jacket hurt you. You had to get away." Claire froze. The words struck her like a cold gust of wind. "What did you say, Noah?" she asked carefully. Noah glanced at her, then at the dog, and replied in a calm, almost dreamlike tone. "Shadow told me. The man was shouting. He had something shiny in his hand. He grabbed Shadow's leg and twisted it. That's how it broke." Claire felt the laundry slip from her fingers. She hadn't told Noah anything about the cause of Shadow's injuries. The vet had only just confirmed the leg had been broken, in a way consistent with deliberate trauma. The mention of the green jacket and the shiny thing felt too vivid, too detailed to be the product of imagination. And then there were the drawings, dozens of them, scattered across Noah's desk. In them, a man with sharp eyes and a red watch appeared again and again, often with Shadow in the background, eyes wide with fear. "Where did you see that man, Noah?" Claire asked once, holding up a picture. "I didn't see him," Noah replied. "Shadow did. He showed me." Claire didn't know what frightened her more, the idea that her son was inventing this as some sort of elaborate fantasy, or the possibility that he wasn't. She began to watch them more closely, and what she saw unsettled her in a way she couldn't put into words. Shadow would often look directly at Noah when the boy was silent, his ears twitching as though listening. And Noah? He would answer questions that no one had asked aloud, respond to things the dog hadn't done, but somehow had expressed. Their communication was like an unspoken language, a shared current of emotion and memory that flowed between them with no clear source. One night after Noah had fallen asleep beside the dog, Claire sat alone, staring at the flickering glow of the fireplace. Her mind returned to the night they found Shadow, battered and trembling in the storm. Maybe it wasn't just chance. Maybe somehow Shadow hadn't stumbled upon them. Maybe he had been led to the one person who could truly hear him. The rain had just started to ease when Claire's phone buzzed with a call from Detective Rios. She stepped into the hallway to answer, leaving Noah curled on the rug beside Shadow, the injured German shepherd who had become part of their home over the past few days. The detective's voice was low and urgent. "Mrs. Turner, I need to tell you something important about the dog you found. His real name is Ranger. He belonged to a retired officer named Martin Hayes. Hayes was found dead 3 days ago, his death's now being investigated as a homicide. And the dog, well, he may be the only witness." Claire's stomach turned. "What do you mean, witness?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ranger was trained in scent tracking and protection work. Hayes never officially decommissioned him after retirement. There's reason to believe Ranger saw something, maybe even someone, on the night of Hayes's death. He ran off during the storm, and we think his injuries weren't accidental. Someone hurt him on purpose, possibly to silence him. Claire gripped the phone tighter. "Are you saying someone might come looking for him?" "Yes," Rios said grimly. "We have a person of interest. His name is James Mercer. He was Hayes's business partner in a private security firm. Things went sour. There were financial disputes, missing money, and Hayes apparently had documents that could expose Mercer. The theory is Hayes confronted him and never walked away. We believe Mercer may have seen Ranger as a liability, especially if Hayes had trained him to track or respond to specific scents, something common among K-9 officers." Mercer might believe the dog could somehow identify him. Claire's pulse quickened. Just the night before, Shadow, Ranger, had barked at a noise by the back fence, his hackles raised, his body trembling with something deeper than fear. She had thought it was the storm, or the echoes of his trauma. But what if it wasn't? What if he had sensed someone out there? Back in the living room, Noah stroked Ranger's fur gently. "He's remembering again," the boy murmured, not looking up. "The man in the red ring. That's who hurt him. That's who hurt the other man, too." Claire's knees went weak. She hadn't said anything about the details of the case in front of Noah. "How do you know that, sweetie?" she asked cautiously. "He showed me," Noah replied simply. "Ranger wants us to be careful." Suddenly, the cozy warmth of their home felt paper-thin, fragile. If Mercer was truly capable of killing Hayes and harming Ranger, he wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Claire looked at her son, still innocent, but wrapped in something much larger than either of them understood. The dog had come to them broken, but maybe not by accident. Maybe it was a final act of loyalty, a wounded protector seeking shelter not just for himself, but for the truth he carried. And now that truth had followed them home. The wind howled like a beast outside, lashing tree limbs against the windows of the Turner home. A spring storm had rolled in fast, heavy with rain, and a strange tension that Claire couldn't shake. Inside, the house was dimly lit, cozy despite the flickering lights. Noah had already fallen asleep, curled beside the fireplace, one arm draped over Shadow, the German shepherd they had taken in just a week earlier. His leg, still bound in a brace from his injury, trembled slightly in his sleep, but his ears remained alert. It was this quiet unease that made Claire pause as she passed through the living room. Shadow wasn't fully asleep. His body was taut, breath shallow, nose twitching with an anxious urgency. Then it came, a sound that didn't belong. A faint, metallic click from the back of the house. Not wind, not rain. Claire froze. Shadow's head shot up, his amber eyes now glowing with focus. A low, guttural growl bubbled from his throat. He stood on three legs, placing himself between Noah and the hallway that led to the back entrance. Claire's heart pounded. She tiptoed toward the rear of the house and peered out through a slit in the curtains. For a moment, nothing. Then lightning illuminated a figure by the back door, hunched and cloaked in black, fiddling with the lock. Panic surged. She grabbed her phone and whispered a call to Detective Rios. "Mercer," the detective said immediately. "He's desperate. Stay inside. Police are en route." But Mercer didn't wait. A crash of shattered glass tore through the night as the door gave way. Claire barely had time to scream before Shadow lunged forward, injured leg dragging, but fury driving him faster than pain could stop. The dog launched himself at the intruder, teeth bared, body a blur of muscle and instinct. Mercer shouted in shock, falling back as Shadow clamped down on his arm. "Noah! Upstairs!" Claire yelled. But Noah was already running toward them, screaming, "Leave him alone!" Mercer struck Shadow hard with a flashlight, trying to shake him off. The blow sent the dog skidding across the tile, yelping, but he stood again, staggering, blood matting his fur. He didn't retreat. He positioned himself in front of Claire and Noah, growling with primal rage. Then, sirens. Blue and red lights burst through the front windows. Mercer froze, then bolted for the side yard, but two officers tackled him before he could escape. The storm roared as Mercer was cuffed and dragged to the cruiser. Shadow collapsed near the front door, panting hard, ribs heaving. Noah dropped beside him. "You did it," he whispered, stroking his protector's head. "You saved us." Claire knelt next to them, tears spilling freely. She had never believed in miracles before, but tonight, an injured, broken dog had stood between her family and something truly evil. And somehow, Despite everything, he had known exactly when they needed him most. Detective Rios sat at the Turners' dining table, his notepad nearly full, yet his questions had only just begun. Across from him sat Claire, her eyes tired, fingers wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. On the floor nearby, Noah quietly played with Shadow, the German shepherd who had, just days earlier, defended them from a violent intruder. But it wasn't just the dog's bravery that had brought the detective back. It was what Noah had said afterward, in the chaos, that wouldn't leave his mind. Noah had described the man before anyone had shown him a picture. A ring with a red stone, a black car with a cracked headlight. Even the name Jimmy, which matched no public information but was used privately by one person. Officer Marcus Fletcher, Shadow's former handler, found murdered weeks ago in his home. Claire had chalked it up to a child's vivid imagination, until Shadow's microchip was traced and confirmed his identity. He wasn't just a stray. He was a retired K-9, trained under Fletcher for a unique kind of police work, scent tracking combined with behavior-based interpretation. Fletcher had believed Shadow had abilities beyond traditional training, abilities he had started documenting in a personal journal. Now, with the journal retrieved from Fletcher's home, the investigation took a surreal turn. Inside were dozens of notes describing mental cues and nonverbal images the dog seemed to convey during training. The most chilling entries detailed Shadow's restlessness days before Fletcher's death, including the description of a man with a ruby ring who had visited the property and made threats over a failed real estate scheme. And then there was Noah. The boy had never met Fletcher, yet somehow he knew what the dog had seen. "Shadow tells me stories in my dreams," he'd said, "but they're not pretend. They feel real, like movies in my head." Dr. Lindholm, the police psychologist brought in to evaluate, was skeptical until she saw Noah's drawing of a specific room, the laundry area in Fletcher's house, complete with the windowless door and the brand of detergent sitting on the shelf. Every detail matched. Rios leaned back, glancing from the boy to the dog. "We've been chasing Mercer for weeks," he murmured. "But maybe we've had the key all along." Shadow lifted his head at the mention of the name. His ears perked. Noah looked up at the detective. "He's scared now," the boy said. "He knows we remember." That statement was enough to prompt Rios to revisit scent samples and locations connected to Mercer's known hideouts. With Noah's visions as odd, unorthodox clues, they triangulated a pattern, an abandoned storage facility on the outskirts of the county. When officers arrived, Mercer was there, ready to run again. He didn't get the chance. In the end, it wasn't just evidence that solved Fletcher's murder. It was a bond, unspoken, unscientific, yet undeniably powerful, between a boy and a dog who shared more than just a home. They shared a truth that no one else could see, until they listened. Max had always been special, but as the weeks went by, his role in the Turner family evolved into something even more extraordinary. What had started as a connection forged through mutual need, Noah, recovering from the trauma of the break-in, and Max, nursing a broken leg, soon became a partnership of healing. The bond they shared was undeniable. Noah had always been a sensitive child, attuned to the feelings of those around him, but Max's presence brought out a side of him that Claire hadn't seen before. A natural protector, a nurturer. It wasn't long before Claire noticed something remarkable: Max's intuitive ability to calm Noah during his toughest moments. After the break-in attempt, the boy had become restless at night, plagued by nightmares, but Max would lie next to him, his warm, steady presence acting as a comfort. The dog's gentle nudge would coax Noah out of his shell, and it was as if Max's calming energy took the edge off the fear. It was then that Claire had an idea. Max could do this for others. That idea soon became reality when the local children's hospital reached out to the Turner family. The hospital had a therapy dog program, and with Max's intelligence and incredible bond with Noah, they believed he could help children who, like Noah, had experienced trauma. The decision wasn't an easy one. Max had been through so much, and he had a special bond with Noah. But Claire saw the same instinct to help in Max that she saw in her son. She knew they were meant to give back. Max's first day at the hospital was transformative. He seemed to know exactly how to behave around the children, sensing their emotional states with a precision that amazed the staff. When he approached a child who had recently undergone surgery, he rested his head gently on the child's lap, offering comfort without saying a word. To Claire's surprise, it was Noah who led Max into the room, guiding him with the same confidence he'd shown when they'd first rescued him. It wasn't long before Max's presence became a lifeline for several children. Sophie, a young girl grieving the loss of her mother, was one of the first to benefit from Max's calming influence. Sophie had barely spoken since her mother's death, her grief too deep to express in words. But one afternoon, Noah brought Max into Sophie's room, and the quiet connection between the two began to shift something inside her. As Max sat by her side, Sophie's hands trembled at first, but slowly she reached out and touched his fur. Max responded with a soft whine, as though he understood the pain she was carrying. Noah, who had witnessed Max's ability to bring people together, quietly spoke to Sophie. "It's okay to be sad," he said, his voice filled with the maturity of someone who had learned how to listen, how to heal. Max, sensing the girl's need, rested his head on Sophie's lap, offering his silent companionship. To Claire's amazement, it was the first time Sophie had spoken since her mother's death. "I miss her," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Slowly, with Max's unwavering presence and Noah's gentle guidance, Sophie began to open up, piece by piece. For Noah, the experience was profound. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about seeing Max use his unique abilities to help children like Sophie, who needed something more than words. It was about the deep, unspoken understanding between Max and the children who, in their own way, communicated their pain and hope. It was a connection Max seemed to understand instinctively, as if he too had healed from his own wounds by helping others. As the weeks passed, Max's role in the family shifted from a protector of Noah to a helper of children, a role that seemed destined for him from the moment he had limped into their lives. His presence in the hospital helped heal not just the children, but also Noah, who found purpose in helping others through his bond with Max. Together, they formed a team of quiet healers, Max with his calming energy, and Noah with his deep empathy and understanding. Max's journey from a broken, abandoned dog to a life-saving companion for a child and a healer for others was nothing short of remarkable. He had not only saved Noah's life, but had given him the strength to help others. And in doing so, Max became more than just a dog. He became a symbol of resilience, compassion, and the incredible power of connection. Max had always been more than just a dog. When Claire first found him, broken and abandoned in their driveway, his legs shattered and his body bruised, she had no idea how deeply he would impact their lives. At that time, all she saw was an injured animal in need of care. But as Max healed, so did the Turner family. His bond with her son, Jack, was something neither Claire nor Jack had ever experienced before. What started as a simple rescue quickly became something much more profound. From the moment Jack first laid eyes on Max, something in him shifted. Jack had always been a sensitive boy, but with Max by his side, he began to develop a quiet strength he didn't know he had. Max seemed to understand Jack's every need, even before Jack could voice it. He knew when Jack needed comfort during the sleepless nights, or when he needed reassurance after the traumatic events they'd been through. Max wasn't just a pet, he was a protector, a friend, and an unwavering source of love. Max's connection to Jack was more than just companionship. It was as if their souls recognized one another, a bond that transcended explanation. Jack would often speak to Max as though they shared a secret language, one that only they could understand. And, in a way, they did. Max, with his intuitive sense of Jack's feelings, knew when his boy was struggling, even when Jack didn't have the words to express it. It was a quiet understanding, a bond that no one else could see, but was felt deeply by the two of them. As Jack continued to heal from his own emotional scars, he began to help others. Max had brought him a sense of purpose, and together they took that purpose to the children's hospital, where Max's empathy and intuition helped countless kids who, like Jack, had experienced trauma. Sophie, a young girl grieving the loss of her mother, was one of the first to benefit from Max's special presence. Sophie had not spoken a word since her mother's death, but with Max by her side, she slowly began to open up, just like Jack had. It was the silent understanding Max offered that brought Sophie comfort, and in turn, it helped Jack understand the importance of using his own empathy to heal others. In the months that followed, Max's role in the Turner family continued to evolve. He was no longer just a dog. They were no longer just a family with a pet. Max had become a symbol of resilience, of healing, and of the extraordinary bond that could exist between humans and animals. His presence had transformed their home, turning it into a safe haven, not only for Jack, but for others in need of love and comfort. Max had given Jack something he hadn't realized he was missing, a deep understanding of empathy, resilience, and the unspoken ties that bound them to each other. He had shown Jack that love could heal, that it could provide safety, and that it could give him the strength to face even the hardest challenges. In the end, it wasn't just Jack who had healed. Max's presence had given Claire the strength to open her heart again, to trust in the magic of the bond they shared. Max's ultimate purpose wasn't just to be a companion. It was to show the Turners the power of love, of resilience, and of the inexplicable, beautiful connection that can exist between a human and an animal. As the months passed, the Turner family found themselves forever changed by their journey with Max. What began as a chance encounter on a stormy night, rescuing an injured dog in need of help, had blossomed into something deeper than they could have ever imagined. Max was no longer just a dog. He had become an integral part of their lives, a member of their family. Jack, who had been through his own share of hardship and heartache, had found not only a companion in Max, but a protector and a source of unwavering support. The bond between Jack and Max grew stronger with each passing day. Jack, once shy and introverted, became more open and confident, finding solace in Max's calming presence. Max had a way of understanding Jack's emotions, anticipating his needs, and offering him comfort in ways that no one else could. They were inseparable. Whether it was spending time in the yard playing fetch, or quietly sitting together as Jack worked on his homework, Max was always by his side, providing a sense of security and love that made Jack feel truly understood. It became clear to Claire and her husband, Paul, that Max's place in their family was not temporary. He wasn't just an animal who had wandered into their lives out of coincidence. He was meant to be there. The connection between Jack and Max was undeniable, and both of them had healed in ways they couldn't have anticipated. They had learned the power of empathy, resilience, and the profound comfort of having a loving companion to lean on through the hardest moments. As the legal process surrounding Max's previous owner's death was finalized, Claire and Paul made the decision to adopt Max permanently. They knew that they were not just adopting a dog, but a friend, a healer, and a protector. Max's role in their family had evolved from a stray in need of help to a steady presence that helped their home feel complete. He had brought them together, healed their wounds, and transformed their outlook on life. On the day they officially adopted Max, Claire and Paul signed the papers with the understanding that Max had become more than a pet. He had become an essential part of their family's emotional support system. Jack, standing beside them as they made the adoption official, felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He knew that with Max by his side, he would be able to face any challenge that came his way. And Max, with his amber eyes full of trust and love, seemed to understand that Jack would always be there for him as well. Their story had come full circle. The family that had once been uncertain and broken had found healing, purpose, and strength in the most unexpected of places. Max had not only survived the trauma of his past, but had turned it into something beautiful. He had helped Jack rediscover his own sense of purpose, teaching him that love could heal wounds, both seen and unseen. As they gathered in their living room that evening, the family shared a quiet moment of reflection. Jack's arm draped around Max as they sat together, a picture of contentment and peace. Claire and Paul exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging the depth of the bond that had formed between them all. They were forever changed by their experiences, by the bond that had transcended the ordinary and had become a legacy of love, empathy, and resilience. Max, the dog they had rescued from a storm, had given them a gift they could never have expected: the enduring connection between boy and dog, a connection that would last for the rest of their lives.